Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are so glad you are here, and just by showing up today, you're already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I am pleased to present two of the most interesting, accomplished, yet publicity-shy music industry leaders I've ever landed. In short, I have stalked these two for quite some time, and I could not be more excited to share them with you. I promise you will leave today thinking, wow, who knew? And you'll also leave a lot smarter and more inspired than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And please ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the session. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not keep this series free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Bob Ezrin. In a legendary career as a music and entertainment producer, performer, personality, and entrepreneur that spans over 60 years, Toronto-born Bob Ezrin has worked around the world on TV, on recordings, TV, film, and live event production with a wide variety of legendary artists, including Pink Floyd, U2, Deep Purple, Peter Gabriel, Rod Stewart, Andrea Bocelli, Taylor Swift, Alice Cooper, Kiss, Lou Reed, Jay-Z, Aerosmith, Berlin, Nine Inch Nails, and many, many others. He remains one of the most sought-after producers working in the world today in US, Canada, and Europe. He's also a serial entrepreneur and was a co-founder of Wow Unlimited Media Incorporated and the Nimbus School of Recording and Media, both in Vancouver, BC, and co-founded and was CEO of Seventh Level Inc. in Richardson, Texas, and Enigma Digital in LA, both seminal companies in interactive education, entertainment, and social media. Bob's been inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, has been named a Fellow of the Royal Conservatory of Music in Toronto, inducted in Canada's Walk of Fame, and was named a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts in the UK. He was named an Officer of the Order of Canada by the Governor General of Canada for his ongoing contributions to music, entertainment production, and for his sustained advocacy of music education, journalism, and environmental justice. Bob, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Tom. What an intro.
And joining Bob is the incredible Felice Mancini. Felice grew up surrounded by music and philanthropy. Her father, legendary composer Henry Mancini, was rising to fame as she was growing up, while her mother, Jenny, a former big band and prolific studio singer, was busy singing on dozens of TV shows and recordings. Felice and her siblings inherited her parents' musical gifts and sturdy family roots. She began singing professionally at age 15. Always giving back, the Mancini family supported the arts and arts education for decades, and Felice started on that track herself. In 1998, she began a life-changing career leading the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation, where she would combine her love of music and her passion for music for work in the social sector. The foundation supports music and arts education programs in the nation's most underfunded K-12 public schools, providing resources and consultation leading to equity and access for all students through the arts. Felice received the Partnership of Professionals Award for her leadership in music education advocacy by the National Association of Music Education, and has received the Music for Life Award from the National Association of Music Merchants. Felice has been commended for outstanding community service for the benefit of citizens of LA County, where she received the Don Johnson Music Industry Service Award from the publishers of Musical Merchandise Review. In 2016, Felice accepted the prestigious National Arts Foundation Award for Americans for the Arts for the foundation's 20 years of service to music education in our schools. A current member of ASCAP, Felice co-manages the vast catalog and music legacy created by her father. Guys, I could go on and on and on introducing these two, but I'm going to shut up now. It is an honor to welcome these two rock stars to our platform. Please take it away, guys.
Oh,
Okay.
I think it's all been said, Bob. Thank you for playing, and see ya. I tell you something. I want to say how I met Bob. And well, okay, first of all, Bob and I had a little conversation. It's like, okay, who is our audience here? How are we going to give value to these folks? Because they're taking their time. Thank you, by the way, anyone who's listening. They're taking time out of their day to be with us. And I'm thinking, whoa, this is a responsibility. And, you know, so I've been stressing a bit about what, you know, what I should say and all this. And it reminds me of a time, like about 6-7 years ago, I was asked to do a CNN international interview, on-air interview with Eddie Van Halen. And Bob, as you know, Eddie was a supporter of our work. And I guess the producers found out that he supported the foundation. So they wanted him to come on and talk with me about that. And I asked Eddie if he'd do it, and he reluctantly said yes. Eddie was a very shy man. And he, you know, he wasn't I have that in common with him. You know, we're kind of under the radar. We were. Anyway, so he did the piece, and those things are very brief and they're rushed, and you know, the lights come on and you feel a little nutty. And he came up to me afterwards. He said, Felice, I feel terrible. I didn't say what I wanted to say. I forgot things. You know, he was really down about it. And I said, Eddie, you were great. You were fine. I said, just remember, they're not going to remember what you said. They're just going to remember how they felt at the end of it. And they'll remember that you support our cause. And so that gave him a little relief. And unfortunately, I don't take my own advice because I kind of felt the same way. And I thought, oh my God, you know, I had this opportunity and I didn't say so many things. But so my point being, whatever this hour brings out with the conversation and for the people listening, they'll just remember, you know, how they felt afterwards. And they might have a little more information about you and me and our relationship with philanthropy and the foundation and what we're doing. So that is what I wanted to say. What do you think about that?
Are you trying to calm me down? Unlike Eddie, I'm okay with this. And I really like this kind of a forum too. Hi, Steve. Thank you for the shout out. And Linda, who is with us from the Bay Area and apparently knows my family out there. Hi, Linda. Say hi to the kids. Tell them I love them. I miss them desperately, and I'll get out there as soon as I can. I'm actually, I'm in Toronto right now, and I would love to turn the camera around so you could see how thick the air is here from the fires in Quebec, which are fairly close by. We're not as bad off as New York. I'm sure you've all seen the photos, but it's pretty bad. And though that is not what we were here to talk about before, I just want to say to everyone who has any kind of influence anywhere in the world to let people know that this is a harbinger of what's to come. And what we need to do as quickly as we can is to mitigate for these kinds of disasters, better preparation. Obviously, we have to do much, much better in controlling how we put greenhouse gases into the air and stuff like that. But we have to accept the fact that this is coming now. There's no way to stop this. what we have to do is to find ways to cope with it. And so we need more resources. We need more people aware. We need more people to be afraid enough to stand up and speak out. That's the end of my soapbox stuff.
Bob, I know you're very involved in this issue right now, and a lot of issues. And, thank you for bringing that up. I was going to ask you anyway, but I know you care. It's a huge issue, and maybe we'll do another one of these down the line.
Yeah.
More focused on, how people can help and all that. But so I just wanted to let people know how I met you and why we're here together. Because when Tom asked me to do this, we were at Aspen Live, which is a music conference that I've gone to every year for 18 years. And he was there and he asked me to do it. And I promptly said no. And I just didn't feel that I was representative of the music industry or had anything to offer in that regard. And then I mentioned it to Bob, my Bob, who you introduced. Well, you didn't introduce us, but I can go to that later. And he encouraged me to do it. So one of my life lessons is say yes, say yes. So I did say yes. And Tom asked me, who would I want to have on with me? And you were the first person that came to my mind. Don't know why, but so I met you 25 years ago. That's exactly when I started working for Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation.
Yep.
And you were on the board. And I remember driving out to San Fernando, and our first office was at your 7th level headquarters.
That's right.
Out there. And you kindly gave us some space out there, and it was, a long commute, but we were grateful. It was free, and that's when I first met you. And not long after that, so Bob Lessetts, who those of you who know me, you know that he's my significant other. And for those who don't know Bob Lessetts,
look him up.
Look him up.
Look him up.
It's funny because, listen, Bob, when you mentioned on one of our calls, our preliminary calls about this thing, you mentioned if anybody wants to know about you, listen to Bob's podcast that he did with you, and they'll know everything there is to know. So I went and listened to it. Because I've known you 25 years, but I've known you in this way. Bob has a way of gleaning.
Speak up.
Sorry. I know it's a tech thing. Anyway, I encourage all of you, whether you know Bob Lessetts or not, tune into this podcast that he did with Bob Ezrin. And there's so much information. It's 2 segments. He did like 4 hours with you, I think.
Yep.
And I learned so much. It was entertaining, informative, moving. So I encourage you all to do that. And even if you don't read Bob's book, which he is working on and he'll finish one day, this is the next best way to find out. But so, Bob, he's on the board of the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation. He was from the very beginning. And, I forget, Bob, how did you meet Michael Kamen?
Oh, well, Michael, I wanted to get into that. So Michael Kamen, who many of you will know, was one of the great film composers of all time, but also great songwriter who wrote Everything I Do It For You with Bryan Adams and numerous other film-related songs that turned out to be big hits, and was one of the workingest composers in Hollywood, though he lived in London at the time. He was playing keyboard and oboe, I'm not kidding, in David Bowie's band in 1974. And they were playing in Toronto in 74, and I knew David from my Lou Reed days And David contacted me and said, we're playing in town, really would love you to come and see the show. And I said, that's great, because we're building this studio here in Toronto, which I would really love to have you come and see. So we organized that I would go to see the show, and then David and his little entourage would come back to the studios at Nimbus 9 Productions. It was called the Soundstage. So I went to see the show, and it was, I mean, as all David productions were, it was really fantastic and wonderful to watch. But there was this guy in the band that looked like Rasputin, played an oboe and keyboards and sang, and I was fascinated by him. And then they all showed up at my studio after the show, like around midnight, um, and you know, I spent some time with David, of course, because we were the ones who were connected. But I saw Cayman out in the studio playing my harpsichord. So I went out to talk to him, and we talked about the harpsichord, we talked about classical music, we talked about, you know, the intersection of classical and contemporary. And like, I felt like I was talking to my cousin. You know, the two of us, uh, we related on such a fundamental level, and I became, if there is such a thing, we became friends instantly. And then we just started corresponding. I moved to New York, and which is where he was living, and we hung out a bunch together. And then we started to do work together. I started to hire him to do, um, you know, some arranging, but also some production for my company, and we became best friends very quickly. So until the day.
How much long after that did he start the foundation?
Oh well, I mean, the foundation didn't start until, I mean, we're 25
96.
years in right now, 96, and he and I met in 74. So, you know, we became best friends in 74 and partners in crime in a lot of stuff. You know, he worked with me on many projects. He worked on Kiss. He worked on The Wall with me. He and I did all the arrangements for The Wall, and then when Roger Waters and I had wasn't so much me. Roger had his falling out with me. He hired Michael to come in and be the producer of the next album after The Wall, the final cut.
I didn't know that.
You didn't? Anyway,
you didn't mention that in the podcast.
Well, I think I may have. I don't know, but it was Pink Floyd that brought Michael to London, and that's where he went with Sandra. They rented Jimmy Page's house, the Tower House, the famous Aleister Crowley house, which is a house full of demons and crazy crap, and that's where they worked on the Pink Floyd stuff, and then they just, they loved it. Sandra's English, and Michael has an affinity for all things English, so they decided to stay in London. That's where they based from that point on, and Sandra's still there in the same house that they bought.
I've been in that house. I had dinner in that house. It's an amazing place. But just a little background, if people don't know. So Michael did the score to the movie Mr. Holland's Opus, and it came out in 1995. And so, inspired by that experience and doing the press junket on that movie with Richard Dreyfuss, the whole arts, music education issue surfaced for them big time. And as you know, the movie, ends quite badly in that regard. For music teachers, but
if you haven't seen it, it's a really moving. It's a really moving piece. It's very emotional and wonderful, and the music's great. What actually happened, Felice, was that Michael went back to his old high school, the High School of Music and Art in New York, and saw Gabe Kosakoff, who God rest him, was basically our guiding spirit, and was on the board from the day that this thing was founded. He went to see him at school. Gabe Kosakoff was his teacher in high school, and said, "How's it going?" And Gabe said, "It's not going very well." And what's the problem? And the problem was that they had all of these broken instruments in storage lockers and no money to repair them and no money to purchase new ones. And they couldn't muster up a whole band because they didn't have the instruments for them to play. And this was the High School of Music and Art, and they didn't have instruments. So that's when Michael was struck by a situation that he then found out was nationwide and was worse than anybody really knew. And so that was the original impetus to create a foundation using the movie brand, using Richard Dreyfuss and his celebrity, and to bring awareness to the country that these situations existed in their schools, and to bring instruments into the public school system in America so every kid in the country had access to a well-equipped, well-taught music program, should they want it. And that was how we started.
And for me, I'm grateful because it enabled me to succeed in my job when I was hired to run the foundation. But Michael had a very narrow focus just on instruments. And, he saw that it was a bigger issue than he was ready to tackle, just with arts education and keeping them vibrant. But he knew that tangible, immediate thing of giving an instrument to a school could make a huge difference. So we focused on that. And it really enabled me to focus on what I was raising money for. And I remember one of our early board members was Ken Cragen. And many of you probably remember Ken. Wonderful, wonderful man, amazing manager and producer of events. And he told me one time that he was in one of the early board meetings. This is before I came along. And there were like 50 people in this meeting because, as you know, Michael was the Pied Piper. So when he started the foundation, he'd be sitting next to somebody on a plane and he'd say, "Do you want to be on our board? And do you want to, so it was like he gathered people that wanted to support this cause. But Ken Cragen was one of the people originally on there. And he talked to me afterwards and he said, "Felice, the only advice I can give you," he said, "you have to focus." This was a big aha for me because it got Ken where he was. He managed to focus on what was important and be disciplined about that. And it really gave me a strong purpose, knowing what I was raising money for, very narrowly defined. And I credit Ken with a lot of smarts in that regard.
Yeah.
Speaking of smart.
We were very lucky to have some very smart people, and still are, some very smart people on the board of the organization. How far of a reach does Opus Foundation have, says Gary Manuel? And it's national. How many kids have we impacted so far, Felice? What would you guess?
Okay, look at it this way. You give one instrument to a school. It's going to last in that school about 10 years. Given kids throw trumpets out windows and instruments get beat up, but a good quality instrument, which is what we give the schools, they will last 10 years in a school. So you're going through how many kids using that instrument. So it's exponential. It's very hard to say how many kids. We've been in nearly 2,000 schools across the country.
Right.
So, you can do the math. You're the smartest
2,000. So let's figure it out. So we are in 2,000 schools, or have been in 2,000 schools across the country, and we figured that hundreds of kids in these schools have had access to the instruments that we provided. So, who knows? Anywhere from 250 to 1,000 to 500,000 kids have benefited from what we've been able to do. To be honest, we've been relatively small because of the focus and because it's tough. to raise money for something as specific as this. And now we're
Bob,
starting to grow.
as
Yes.
the fundraiser for the organization, I beg to differ.
Okay, go
I
for
have
it.
not had a hard time raising money for this issue. And having the movie as the focal point was like manna from heaven. And people saw that movie. And as the years went by, even if people didn't see the movie, it's very easy to tell them what it's about and how a music teacher transformed lives over his career and what that meant. And honestly, it resonates with foundations, with family foundations, with people all around. I haven't found it a struggle, and I'm blessed in that way. So I just to tell you, but
that's good.
In general,
So,
you're correct. There's so many issues.
But as in every other aspect of my life, I'm being schooled by my partner. And, okay, it wasn't that difficult. The bottom line is we've been relatively small, focused. We're growing now, and thanks to the support of the Eddie Van Halen Foundation and some other foundations, now our reach is expanding, and we have a new approach beyond just the supplying of actual instruments into schools. And that's for another conversation, is that we could take a whole session to do that.
We could.
How do people get involved? You can just go, there you go. Somebody put it up.
Go to the website.
There it is. There's a link in the chat room, which is great. That's the best thing to do, take action.
Or you can email me, feel free to email me. I'm very available. But, I wanted to say that because a lot of you are Nashville based. I know Tom is, and many people on here. And I just want to shout out to CMA Foundation, because
very much so.
With our new focus on school districts and data and real systemic change and movement in the sector, CMA Foundation has really been a partner in allowing that to happen. And not just with funding, which they've been incredibly generous, but apparently what we're doing also means a lot to Music City and to the people that live there and the state of Tennessee. We're now working in the entire state of Tennessee with all of their school districts on a very large, impactful project that will be rolled out. I think probably by August, we'll have surveyed at least 70% representation of students in the state. And it's very exciting. You can go to CMA Foundation's website. It's called SOTA, S-O-T-A, State of the Arts. Anyway, this is the first statewide effort ever done like this. And what we're now providing in school districts, they're telling us they've never seen anything like this before. So it's really, really exciting. And again,
just to put it really like really succinctly, it's basically identifying what resources they have, what resources they need, and helping them to find a way to get all that and deploy it effectively. So, because I'm sure none of you will believe it, but school districts actually sometimes don't have a handle on, never mind what they have, but who's working for them. So to have that kind of an audit available to them is very useful. And also go ahead.
No, I just if you think about the depth of this, for an example, we're doing this in Los Angeles, in LA Unified, which is the second largest school district in the country. It's a huge thing. They just had a huge change in structure, leadership, and they're now ready for, it's called MEDS. I won't get into it, but we've worked with LA schools. We're in it. We've worked with LA schools for 25 years. So we're now doing this project with LAUSD, and it's become a social say that fast.
But let's just it is a social justice issue.
We're addressing equity and including kids with, disabilities, learning differences, unhoused foster kids, English language learners. I mean, the kids that slip through the cracks with their education, including, high functioning kids but we tend to work in low income school situations and communities. But, this issue is very important. It's not just about playing an instrument. And I think with the audience we have today, music has affected everyone in this audience, clearly. And not everyone, I know this from my own dad. He struggled in school. He got D's and F's. I mean, I've seen his report cards. I have one. And all A's in music. I mean, some people, that's how they learn. That's how they relate in the world. Music gives them their voice. And we all know this. And you translate that to kids around the country and how some of them may not learn how other kids learn. We're finding out how kids learn. And if it's through the arts, we want it there front and center. And it has to be. It's so crucial. So this is what fires me up, clearly. And that's what we're doing. We're doing really important work. So I'm happy about that.
We have a question which Dana Childs wants to know if we partner with the Fender Foundation. Felice? I know we've done some stuff with Music Rising with the Fender Foundation, which is a whole other subject.
Fender has a program called Fender Play, and they are in LA. They're in some other places too. I know they want to do more in Nashville, and we know about each other's work. They provide guitars and curriculum for guitar in schools, and they donate the guitars. So I do know about them. We have had conversations. So we don't really have partners per se, but we do like to spread the resources and to know about each other's work and bolster it where we can. So yes, we do know about Fender.
Here's the thing. So we also got a link from Norwood Creech, basically talking about an initiative in Memphis. Look, as far as we're concerned, any initiative that is legitimate and is helping kids to connect with music through their schools or after school is all right with us. And we suggest that if there's something down the street from you that you can help, do it. It doesn't all have to come through the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation.
Well, and it can't. Too big an issue.
Right.
Everybody's important. And the Memphis Music Initiative, we're very well aware of it. It's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're very effective and wonderful. And we're actually doing our project in, I believe that's Knoxville, that's Knox County. And we're doing work there also. And we work very closely with their arts leadership in that district. So it'll all connect, the connections, they'll all be made sooner or later. And this is a great forum to let people know so that we can make those connections down the road. Very good.
Earlier on in the chat room, I noticed we were back on the environmental tip, and somebody was saying, well, what can artists do? And look, what all of us can do is communicate quickly to people who will listen. And first of all, learn what you can about where we are, what the situation truly is right now. I would say of all the press outlets that I've read that cover the subject of the environment, maybe the best is The Guardian out of the UK. And you can sign up. They have a newsletter every Thursday. You can sign up and read their newsletter. It's quite remarkable, and it covers the world. There's a paper. Every paper that you have from New York Times, Washington Post, all of them have now environment bulletins, which you can sign up for, and you can gather as much information as you can, educate yourself, learn what we're looking at, and then get out and start talking about it. Right now, it's amazing that Donald Trump still dominates the news, dominates the world of news media and the environment, even though we're looking at Armageddon. There's New York that has the worst air in the world today. And even though that exists, it gets less press than the upcoming presidential election. And my view is, if we should be talking to all of our press outlets and all of our, from broadcast to online media, anyone that we can, send them the message, talk about climate change, talk about the environment, tell us what's happening and what to do, and start making that story number one, because it's the most existential thing we face right now, next to maybe AI. But that's for another that's another one of my passions. But that's for another session. Now, does anybody have musical questions that they want to ask?
No, I have a question for you, Bob Ezrin. What is the best piece of advice you ever got?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. The best piece of advice I ever got, it's not a piece of advice, but it was a bit of wisdom. The best bit of wisdom that I got, and that really helped me to survive this long and to have a pretty good life. I would like to say fairly balanced now and happy. It came through tragedy, but when I was producing, when oh my goodness, when I was producing Killer for Alice Cooper in Chicago, and this would be 1972. At that time, my parents had adopted a child. I was the eldest of 5 biological children, and then my parents adopted a young boy, like 13 years after. When my youngest sister turned 13, my mother got empty nest syndrome, even though they were all still living at home except for me. So they adopted a little boy, and unknown to them, he came with a fatal illness. He came with a disease called Anschiller-Christian disease, which is a kind of a leukemia, and it started to present itself when he was about 6 months or 7 months old. My dad was a doctor. My dad was associate professor of medicine at the University of Toronto, and there was a mad scramble to try to keep this kid alive. And it went all around the world. There were doctors from Switzerland to China that were trying to find ways to deal with this almost certainly fatal illness. And Michael went into cardiac arrest while I was in Chicago. I had just started doing the Killer album, which was my 3rd ever production. I was a baby. I was like 22, 23 years old at the time. And I'd finally gotten this amazing job and this incredible opportunity that I thought, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And the manager of RCA Mid-America Studios, where we were recording, a guy named Dick Forbear, I will never forget him. Big, tall, handsome, muscular guy, about 6'4", always wore a suit and tie. And I went into his office when I got the call saying that I should probably come home now. And I said to Dick, I feel terrible. I'm leaving everybody here, and I don't know what to do, like, about the project. I'm so sorry, Dick. I know we got the time booked and everything. He said, listen. He said, nobody ever died for want of a rock and roll record. You go home. And there have been many times in my life where something has come up that was really important, something that was a matter of either life or death, or something that was a matter of my, that involved my children, or was a matter of deep relationships. And I might have been in the midst of a project. And I can say honestly that while I worked a little too much in the early days, and I missed some of my kids growing up, and I do hold a certain level of regret for that. Mostly when important things happen, I would be there, regardless of what was going on in the studio or with my career, sometimes to the detriment of my career. But at the end of the day, um, I'm happy. I'm a happy guy, and I know a lot of people that have done what I do, and have been in the business for a long time, and many of them are not happy. And I think it's because they have put the business part of what they do over and above the human part of who they are and what they do. That's it. Is that a good answer, Felice?
I love that answer. And I actually, in listening to the Bob Westhett's podcast about Bob Ezrin, I had heard a bit of that story before. And the whole thing's pretty inspiring. I mean, you've had an amazing life. And not to say that mine pales by comparison, but, we were in different worlds. You were doing Alice Cooper and I was listening to the Carpenters. It was like I had different
by the way, I was listening to the Carpenters too while I was doing Alice Cooper, and so was Alice.
Well, it's funny. My dad, he had his heyday in the late 60s and the 70s, and at that time I was a teenager and getting into college, and my musical tastes were not benign. I loved my musical taste. Maybe it's because I was a vocalist. I was a singer, so I gravitated towards singers rather than the sound. But what was my point? So my dad, being in the business, he introduced me to Pink Floyd. He introduced me to people that I wasn't listening to. And because he just absorbed all kinds of music. And he felt that was really important to know what was going on. I mean, he was writing everything out longhand, and when computers started, especially with, making music, he got a coach. He got somebody to come in and teach him. And so he absorbed a lot more different styles of music than I did. And I learned from my dad. And I noticed Tom has a question about music industry mentor. My dad doesn't count. Well, really.
Oh, come on. How can you say that?
Well, what I learned from my dad didn't have to do with music necessarily. I learned more music from my mother. She was the singer, she was the worker, she was she was connected. And but my dad, I think I got his, I don't know if you can tell, but his humility. He always underplayed everything, which I tend to do. And he also had a philosophy, wait 4 beats. When anything happens, wait 4 beats, don't react, just let it sit there. So, little things I learned over the years from him. And, I didn't have real huge mentors in my life, but everybody I surrounded myself with had an influence on me. And I think that, okay, good. I had disconnected the phone. That's one tech thing I did. I'm hearing it in the rest of the house. Once I started running a foundation, and
not wait for a beat, Tom Truitt. She said wait 4 beats.
Wait 4 beats.
4 beats.
Wait Wait 4 measures, wait 4 beats before you react. Let it sink in, get your bearings. You know, one of the stories that I heard you tell on the podcast, and I actually knew this from before, Bob, was during the LA riot. And, you know, you had a story about that and how that impacted you. And I remembered specifically, that's how I got into social work, nonprofit work. I was inspired. I wasn't inspired by them, but I was terrified when the LA riots happened. It was in '92, I believe.
Yep.
And, you know, I lived up in the Hollywood Hills at the time, and I could look down and I saw fires. I saw things. There was a curfew put on us, and it was really terrifying. And I was afraid, other than the curfew, I didn't want to go out of my door. People were afraid in LA.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had a friend at the time who had just started this little youth group in Emmanuel Presbyterian Church, which was down at Vermont and Wilshire, you know, the heart of the Rampart district, which is, you know, 8 gangs in their territory and, you know, a bad place. And he got a little youth center going to keep kids, you know, playing basketball during after hours and stuff. So he asked me to come and volunteer there. And this was right around the time of the riots. And I said, you know, I don't want to be afraid living in my city. I was born and raised in LA. I love it here. And I forced myself to go to that place and start volunteering just to not be afraid of what was out there. And it really changed my thinking. You know, I'm making lunch for these kids and I'm seeing that this is a safe haven. And we're starting, you know, music programs for them and acting programs, all this stuff that was engaging the kids. And I really, it really affected me. And they asked me to be on the board. I said, of course I'll be on the board. I didn't know what that meant. It was the first board I ever went on. And they said, would you be our development director? I said, sure, what's that? And, you know, the unpaid fundraiser. I said, okay, I don't really know about it. And I went to UCLA, I took a course in fundraising, and then I said, well, I might as well go all in. So I did the whole certification in fundraising and nonprofit management. It got me, you know, it was that thing that was the catalyst. And I'm not sure why I brought that up. I just know that you told the story, which it was just a point of connection that I had with you, that event really launched something for me anyway.
It changed a lot of our lives, and my story about the riots would take an entire session. So
okay,
I'm gonna let that one go. I did want to say, you know, you asked me what was the best piece of advice I ever got, and was it the best piece of advice? The other one was, I'd forgotten about this because this is really good. Seventh Level, the company that you talked about, there was a change of leadership at the top. My partner, who was the CEO of the company, I was president, I was running the studio, he was running the business. The board excused him of his responsibility, and I became the reluctant CEO of a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ exchange.
Wow.
And I, you know, it was pretty freaky. And one of my board members was a guy named Jim Canavino, who was brilliant. He was the president of Perot Systems, Ross Perot's company in Texas. He had been the number 2 guy at IBM. He's the guy who basically invented the laptop. So brilliant guy. And I was struggling with the forces of nature and business and all that stuff. And he at one point said to me, what you need to do is open your arms and let the wind blow you where you ought to go and stop trying to be the wind. And it just floored me. I was like, okay, I don't have to produce something that I don't know anything about. I can just find out which way the wind is going to blow me, and I can react as I go along that.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, Bob Casper. Wow, Peter Bliss. Nice one. That's a wonderful reference, and thank you for that. Anyway, so that was the other thing, and I have one other thing to say that was not a piece of advice given to me, but it's a piece of advice I give to other people, and
good.
I remind them. There is a famous poster that many of you may have seen, which is a poster of a grizzly bear facing a waterfall with his mouth open and a salmon that's leaping out of the waterfall towards the grizzly bear.
Seen it.
You've seen it, right?
Yep.
So my advice is that bear has been standing there with his mouth open, waiting for a few minutes until good fortune fell into it. And my advice to everyone is put yourself in the path of opportunity. Be the bear. Stand there with open arms, an open heart, open ears, and be aware of what's coming over the waterfall. And the world is so full of miracles and wonders that if we simply put ourselves in the path of those things, we will be the beneficiaries of some amazing and magical stuff. That's what I have to say.
That's really, that is beautiful. And it reminds me of when we started this and, about saying yes. And I remember when I was offered the job at the Mr. Holland Zelka Foundation, I looked at Bob Yerband and Doreen Ringer Ross at the time, and I said, no, I can't do this. They gave me this job description that was all these things. I had no idea. I wasn't a marketer. I wasn't a finance person. All these things. And I said no. And they insisted. They said, Felice, you can do this. You can do this. And I said, yes. I cannot imagine my life over the last 25 years if I had said no. It tears me up to think that I could have not had these experiences and met these people. Oh my God! Even meeting Bob, my Bob left that you actually got us together. Really, first impression. So
Explain
Bob,
that.
Well,
Go ahead.
No, you put a panel together of people for this networking group in Palo Alto called the Churchill Club, and you called Bob and said, would you be on this panel? I'm putting this together for the foundation. And it was Neil Portnow, Ken Hertz, couple other people. Bob will tell this story. If you ask Bob, how did we meet? This is a half-hour story. Mine's very abbreviated. But when I first met Bob, it was like, and Bob says he lives by this. The Paula Abdul School of Relationships, opposites attract. That's his thing. And I have to say, I could not be more opposite than Bob Lefka. However, what he's brought I said yes to Bob at one point, and after I read a Beach Boys thing he wrote, and I said, oh, I love this guy. Once I started reading what he was writing, I couldn't resist. I said yes. We've had our ups and downs. This is a relationship, they're all wacko. But if I had said no to that, oh my God, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here talking to you, to Tom, to these folks. So my advice, say yes. And as Bob would say, walk out the front door, just get out there, show up. And a mutual friend of ours, Andy Astrachan, who Bob and I ski with, he told me a piece of advice once that I've never forgotten. It's just one word. We were at the precipice. We were skiing in Vail. We were skiing, and it was a very gnarly, steep, not groomed run that we had no choice, and I was there with him. And I'm looking, Andy, I can't, I was afraid, I was so fearful. And I was not a bad skier at the time. I was a good skier, but you look at these drop-offs and it's like, I can't do this, but you have no choice. And he said, okay, I'm going to say one word to you. This is what a ski instructor told me and it changed my life. I said, tell me. He said, commit. Just commit. And once you do that, the fear kind of goes back here and you look at what's in front of you and you deal with it. But you have to commit to it. You have to own it and just, so that's really been important to me. Not only for skiing, but it really helps with that because that's physically like threatening. And if you don't commit to that, you could die. But anyway,
Doreen's here.
my
Doreen's here, by the way.
Hi, Doreen.
Hi, Doreen. Hi, Doreen.
Yeah.
We love you.
I think several of our board members would be here too.
Oh, Mary Jo. Look at Mary Jo's here too.
Hi, Jo Manila.
Wow. I'll go back up here. There's lots of people that we know, and I'm sorry for not calling people out. I've just been so fascinated with what Felice has to say that I've been reading
I'm riveting.
all the chats.
Okay.
Well, you are. So, Tom, what's up? Is this it?
I could sit here and listen to 3 more hours of this. And I think the audience would high five me on that. You both artfully ignored the question I asked you. What was the very first record you both bought with your own money?
Oh, I thought you were talking to the chat room.
No, I'm talking to you guys.
Oh, I can tell you. I can tell you. The very first record I ever bought was Tan Shoes and Pink Shoelaces by Little Dodie Stevens, whose real name was Geraldine Stevens, and who I actually many years later dated.
No kidding.
I was 8 years old and bought that record, and I was just so in love with her. And then I met her in a studio, and we dated for a minute, but that was pretty amazing.
Wow.
She's fantastic, a wonderful person, and a great singer. Yeah.
Felice, how about you? First record you purchased with your own money?
Okay. I feel like I'm making this up, but I'm just remembering when I was very little and what I used to listen to. And it was stuff like Bobby V. And there was a record I remember, a 45. It was called Hark, Is That a Cannon I Hear? And I forget who did it, but I played it over and over and over, and we danced to it. And, we were into Broadway shows. So I really have a feeling that the first album I bought was like Bye Bye Birdie or something like that. But
listen, Felice had the great fortune of living in Henry Mancini's home, and Ginny too. I mean, the two of them were unbelievable, musical forces. And I have to say that I grew up in a similar circumstance. So my father's primary job was as a doctor, but he worked his way through medical school as a bass player in a big band in the Bobby Jimby Orchestra, which was the biggest band up here. And my mom was a concert pianist who was too shy to play live. So the only audience that she ever had was the audience in the house. And me as a little kid sitting under the piano when she would play the Warsaw Concerto, which was my original exposure to heavy metal music. And if any of you don't know the Warsaw Concerto, look it up. And my parents had a hi-fi mono, of course, with one big speaker. It was like 15-inch speaker, so we could crank up the music and play it, and there was so much bass. I just loved it. And some of this classical stuff, like the overture to Romeo and Juliet, Tchaikovsky, that is also heavy metal. And one of the most powerful pieces of music ever written, or the Bach B minor Mass and stuff like that, that just washed over me. And at the same time, my dad's brother, my Uncle Sid, was the first guy to have stereo in Canada and was the largest private collector of jazz records in the country. So he had a collection of records that took up the entire basement of the house. And he had a room full of different kinds of turntables because you could only play, you know, like these 10-inchers had to go on this one and the 78s had to go on that one. And then there was transcription stuff. And he had tape recorders. And as a little kid, I started playing with recording and tape, I would say at the age of 7 or 8, same sort of thing. And when I was 12, my parents bought me a tape recorder for my birthday. And I used to sit upstairs in my bedroom when they'd gone to bed, when everyone else had gone to bed. I had a little record player here, and I would pretend that I was Bob King with the King Thing, coming to you live from downtown. Or except in those days, it was Bob King with the King Thing. You know, my voice hadn't changed, but I was like Mr. Radio, and I used to record the stuff that was happening out in the street, the cars going by, and put records in. And so, like, I was indoctrinated from an early age and pretty much had no choice as to what I was going to end up doing, you know, with that as an influence. Yeah, and so fortunate for all of that.
We were
Both of
lucky
you
that,
ordained. That's awesome. Bob, let me
Yeah.
ask you this. Did you by chance work on the Dream On record from Aerosmith?
On Dream On? Well, no.
How about
But
Toys in the Attic?
Toys in the Attic. Well, I was the executive producer of Get Your Wings, which was the album. But as the executive producer, really what I did was I put together the production team, and I would listen to stuff after the fact. I cannot and don't want to take credit for having produced or been the impetus for anything that happened on that album. That's what they did was them with Jack Douglas and Ray Colcord, who
That
I
was
thought
my
were
first
two
record.
amazing talents. And like I was developing Jack as a producer. He was an engineer at the record plant, had done a bunch of work with me, and I had him start to learn to produce and do some stuff first with me, and then I had him do some stuff on his own. And when Aerosmith came along, I was already committed to do something else, but also, in all honesty, I didn't think that that the match between me and Steven Tyler at that time was going to be that healthy for both of us. So I just suggested, maybe I said, I got this guy that's working with me that is fantastically talented, and I'll keep an eye on it. They had their guy, Ray Colcord, a wonderful keyboard player, really smart guy. And I said, well, let's put them together and let's see how it goes. And I just watched it from the beginning. Jack, involved me at a very early stage in some of the decisions, but not, that album was their work, the band and those two guys.
Right. Well, listen, I could go on and on and on, but we do need to wrap up. And I just want to simply say to the audience, you got exactly what I promised at the outset, and that is you are leaving today a hell of a lot more smart and more inspired than you were. The wisdom you two have shared with us is incredible. And I just thank you for the work that you've done. Bob, thank you for all the music that you've touched. Felice, thank you for all the great work that you do at Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation and the countless lives that you've impacted by leading that organization. I'm beside myself with happiness about today's session, and I hope you all are too.
thank you. It was a
Thank you, and
privilege.
thanks everybody for showing up, and anybody that
Yeah, thanks for watching.
the notes have gone by so fast, and there have been people I wanted to say hey to, but I missed my moment. Anyway, thank you all. See you
Thank
again.
you.
Stay safe. Be nice to each other. See
Okay.
you on the flip side.
Adios. Bye.